So hi, everyone, and welcome to the part 4 of the 20 Minutes with Marco. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us for these important conversations. My name is Caitlin Woods, and I'm a project agent for the Restigouche CBDC's Hire for Talent project. And I am joining you today from Campbellton, New Brunswick, which is located on the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq First Nations, on which we learn, work, and play. We have Marco Pasqua, who has joined me today to talk about inclusive onboarding. So as some of you know, Marco is an award-winning entrepreneur, accessibility consultant, and an inspirational speaker. Marco has an extensive amount of expertise working with business leaders who are well known for more accessible, inclusive workplaces. So before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that closed captioning is available, and you could turn it on at the bottom of your menu bar by clicking on the live transcription button. So I want to say a huge thank you to Marco for joining me today. It's always such a pleasure when we have the chance to connect. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So I do have a couple questions for you today, Marco. And the first one is, why do you think an employer or an HR representative should consider an inclusive onboarding process?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. First of all, it's great to be back here. And I can't believe we're already at part 4 of a 5-part webinar series. This is just flown right by. With regards to your question on why an employer should consider an inclusive onboarding process, well, that to me is a no-brainer. It's simple. It sets the tone from the top that you're an organization that is inclusive of all individuals that are coming through, and that you want to be reflective of the community that you're working with. I think many people get kind of nervous about starting a new job or potentially working with an existing employer. And if they have potentially a disability which isn't visible, it's an invisible disability, or they've acquired one later on in their employment cycle, it can be really nerve-wracking when you're letting an employer know. Now, when you're first onboarding in a new organization, that's a lot of information to take in. You want to know what the processes are, what the policies are within the organization. And ultimately, as an employee, you want to know if that employer is the right fit for you. As much as an employer is looking for employees that fit their culture, you truly want to know that an employer is actually going to be there for you. So it sets that tone. It supports employees from the get-go, which is really important. And right now, we're having somewhat of a retention issue in many different organizations for a number of different reasons. So it helps to build retention, employee retention. By creating that tone right out the gate, you're saying to employees, this is what you can expect from us. This is how organized we are with our information. And ultimately, we want to create an experience for you where you feel like you have all the tools that you need in order to get your job done well. So anyone who's listening today from the HR space knows this. The reason why it's called human resources is because there's humans behind all of this. It's not just people punching in numbers to get a job done. There's a real culture there that is applied based on people's individual personalities and the reason why you thought they would be a good fit for the organization to begin with. And I guess finally, for that first question, it makes employees feel comfortable that if they haven't disclosed whether or not they have a disability or not, potentially in your onboarding process, there's an opportunity for them to disclose. And I know that more organizations are looking to get those metrics and those numbers about individuals who are visible minorities, individuals who do have forms of disabilities, whether visible or invisible. And I like to believe altruistically, that's to cater to the needs of those individuals to help bring their full self to work in a lot of the great employers that are out there. And so by building an onboarding process that's inclusive, you're going to get all of that. Plus, you're going to get more out of the employees because they're going to want to do more for you and the organization overall because their needs have been met.
Yes, of course. Those are great points. And I think they're really important to point out. So my second question, what steps should be taken to ensure a successful inclusive onboarding process?
Yeah, so as I said, kind of in the first question, that's going to depend on what the initial role is for the individual. We all have different roles to play in an organization. So my kind of key question is, are you setting up the individual for success, whatever that looks like in the role in which they're doing? And in my accommodations documents that I put together for the Hire for Talent website in the latest toolkit, I kind of go over 5 main questions when you're working with, say, disability service organizations in the onboarding process. Before I get into that, though, I'm going to touch a little bit on an experience that I had when I started as an accessibility consultant, and I was working out of Van City Credit Union. So shout out to my friend Lindsay, who's in the audience today, who works for Van City and is in HR. It's really, really kind of cool because Van City is a super inclusive employer, and I'd never come across an employer like this in my entire life. I was actually working for 25 companies at the same time as a consultant overall, but I was being housed at Van City. And I remember their onboarding process because it was unlike anything I'd ever come across. They said to me, before you start in your role, about a week before, we're going to have you come in to the office space and take a look at where you're going to be seated. And we're going to look at your desk space. We're going to talk about your role. And they were working with a third-party organization called the Neil Squire Society, which is now supporting our province, the province of British Columbia, province-wide. And what they were doing was having an occupational therapist actually come in and assess what I would be doing in my role as an accessibility consultant. So I thought this was just tokenism because I do have a visible disability. I use a wheelchair. And I found out from the HR team that this is actually something that they have done for all individuals company-wide when they're being onboarded. And so things like, I came in, sat down at my desk, and the OT asked me, what kind of things will you be doing in your role? Immediately, I can see that you're leaning in and kind of straining your back to look at your monitor. Instead of having your monitors on a pedestal, why don't we have them on an arm that you can bring the monitors closer or further away from you so you can see better? That's something I never would have addressed. So I said, oh, yeah, that's actually a great idea. And then she said, well, do you use a laptop? Are you going to be on the go? Yeah, I actually am. Well, that must be difficult to carry a laptop with you and have it on your lap when it's sliding all over the place when you're pushing and moving your wheelchair. I said, well, yeah, but I mean, I can figure that out. She says, well, how about we get you a lap stand that it's an anti-slip so that, it's not slipping off of your lap if you're moving around and having in-depth conversations with people that are coming in for advisory. I said, that's brilliant. I never would have thought of that. So by the end of this conversation, we chatted for about 45 minutes. We talked about the nuances of the role. This individual had created a laundry list of onboarding things that would make my life easier by the time I started in the role. And then it was sent over to the hiring manager to either approve or disapprove of different things based on this occupational therapist assessment. And by the time I started my role, being housed at the HR department in Van City, I had all of those tools at my fingertips ready to go. So it's really important that if you are able to, some organizations are smaller, some are larger. If you can work with a disability service organization, it's really important to consider those things. And the 5 questions that I included in my accommodation documents on hirefortalent.ca is, do your services come at a cost? And if so, do you have funding sources that can help us, to acquire these things? What supports will we receive from your organization once the candidate is placed? As you can hear from my experience with Van City, that made a big difference, right? How long do you offer these supports after we've hired someone? So do they just hire right up to the point or help right up to the point that the individual's hired and then leave? Or is there a little bit of an offset there where they're supporting even after the fact, right? So what supports do you offer candidates to ensure workplace readiness? In addition to accommodations and equipment, are there additional supports that can be there, such as job shadowing? Maybe somebody has an intellectual disability. They require a little bit more supports after the fact of being hired on. And then finally, what do you expect from us as a business in working with you? Getting those points of clarity right out the gate is going to really help you and your organization understand, is it possible to work with this third-party disability service organization, or is there potentially another organization locally or somebody that you can collaborate that can give you some of the same services at a cost or at an area at which would make sense for your organization depending on your needs?
And it's great that you mentioned that, Marco, because I feel like I always go back to this in every one of these 20-minute conversations. But all those things that you mentioned are great for any employee. I mean, when you go into a new job, you want to know what you're walking into. You want to feel comfortable. It's even me. I don't have a visible disability, but I'm a little bit shorter. So at my workplace right now, my desk is too high for me. So it's just a matter of somebody coming in and putting a keyboard slot in so my keyboard fits me better. So it's just simple little things like that that can make it a lot more pleasurable.
Yeah, exactly. People think that it's going to cost a whole heck of a lot of money. Sometimes it's just minor adjustments. It's funny that you say about the keyboard slider, because I actually, in that same assessment, I actually had the slider removed because my knees were actually bashing into it when I was trying to roll my wheelchair underneath my desk, and it wasn't a desk that raised or lowered. So just simply by removing that tray, that was an access feature for me. And that didn't cost any money. It just took somebody from facilities to take a screwdriver and remove that tray and put the keyboard on top of my desk as opposed to underneath the slider. In your case, actually giving you that sliding tray accommodated your height, right? So I think that is fantastic.
Exactly. And even just you mentioned job shadowing. I think anybody would agree that when you walk in to a new job, it's nice to have somebody to kind of show you around, to look up to kind of point you in the right direction in terms of your new work. So that was a good point as well.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is, what benefits will the business experience as a result? So how about the employee as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said earlier, employee retention is something that is really sought after right now, simply because we're not getting, a lot of retention with employees right now. I know that we're in a little bit of an influx with hybrid workplaces, people wanting to work from home, things of this nature. But I think that what you're going to get from that experience, like that experience with Van City, was over 3+ years ago now. And it still sticks with me to this day, to the point that I use that story as an example as to how any organization can get started. So I think, really setting up those roots to have employees that want to stick with your organization longer, that have understandings of where you want to go with your employee culture, where you want to go as an organization, and ultimately that they feel like they can bring their whole self to work at any given time, and that it's not going to be an issue if those needs change. I think that if you bring employees into the process of the onboarding, for example, if they've been with the organization for a long time, ask your employees, conduct a survey, ask them what the onboarding experience was like for them. Are there things that you could adjust or improve? Because ultimately what they're going to get out of that is that you truly do want to hear their voice, and that you want them to be a part of the overall evolution of the organization and where it can go. If we truly do want to create organizations that are reflective of people in our communities, I think that we do have to address those people in our community to say, listen, what can we do to improve upon ourselves? This is not about exposing ourselves for any of the downfalls that we might have as an organization. It's actually so that we can be one of the long-standing organizations that's there through and through. And I think that any organization that has survived through the pandemic over the past 2 years are the ones that were willing to not be stubborn and learn how to adapt themselves and their policies in order to be the most successful. I know that for myself as an independent entrepreneur, if I didn't adapt very quickly to be a presenter that could present online and have a really good sound setup and do all those things, I wouldn't be where I am today. So by including your employees, your existing employees, on any changes that you have on onboarding or bringing on new employees, it's going to not only have them feel like, okay, you actually care about the new employees that are coming in, but you care about us existing employees and having our voices being heard at the table.
And I think it's great too, because as I know, a lot of businesses have probably seen, a lot of businesses and workplaces are short-staffed. It's hard to find, employees nowadays. So if you can make that onboarding process successful and keep that employee, I mean, it's just going to benefit your business in the end.
It takes so long to retrain employees. So anyone in HR right now who's watching this video, you got to know that it's so much more effort and work to retrain someone, to get them on board, to get them excited about the culture. Why would you want to do that when you can hold on to great employees that were already part of the process if they felt that they were being listened to from the get-go?
Definitely. I guess, do you have any final words or tips or any resources that you would like to share with everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is going to sound like a plug, a shameless plug, but I truly do mean it. Hire for Talent's resources, especially since you just relaunched the brand new website, which is more accessible and inclusive. So you have a really cool system there with your different toolkits that kind of bring you all the way from the 101 understandings of disability all the way down to employee retention and onboarding and all of those things. So I would highly recommend that people go to hirefortalent.ca, check out those resources. They're absolutely free. They've been provided thanks to the funding of the Canadian government, which I think is fantastic, and the various partners that have contributed to that. So I would say just look at that, keep yourself on top of the latest trends, and ultimately just remember that people are people and there are people behind this process, and to consult them, ask them what would best support them throughout these entire processes.
Awesome. So thanks so much, I guess, for sharing all those wonderful comments and feedbacks. But if anybody has any questions at this point, we're just about at the 20-minute mark, so feel free to ask away.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this process because of the time that people can take to kind of reflect on the things that we've said. So please don't be shy about it either. If you have a question or something that you don't feel comfortable necessarily addressing to the crowd as well, you can always email us after the fact. But even if you have comments about what you've heard, is there anything that I said or that Caitlin said that made you go, actually, I never thought about it from that perspective? I'd love to hear any of your thoughts. Oh, it looks like Lindsay asked a question here. What do you recommend when welcoming folks back to the workforce after a leave? That's a really interesting one, Lindsay. And I know that, as people are starting to kind of go even back into the office and to the workplace from working from home, I think it's just having an open and honest sort of conversation. I think that many people have gotten used to the idea that they can work from home. And I think that from what I've heard, many employers are struggling with the fact that some roles, they just don't accommodate or don't allow for you to work from home as much as you might have been for the past 2 years, simply because, for example, I work with a lot of city representatives and cities who have community centers or rec center operators. They actually do need you on site and in-house at those locations in order to run those physical locations. So it's not as easy to give some departments work from home opportunities as others. So my recommendation when welcoming people back is being super clear about the important nature of their role, depending on what it is. And if they do have individualized needs, which supersede that of general policy of an organization, I would say let them know that you have an open door policy. I know, Lindsay, with your role in HR and accessibility and disability awareness, it's really important to have that understanding, but also to be vulnerable and open a little bit. So if there is opportunity for you to meet with individualized people to have that conversation about what their needs might be, even if they differ from the next employee, I think it's really important, and to have an understanding and open conversation with the group overall to say that employee X might experience these things or have these accommodations, and you might not have those out the gate. But if you do have individualized needs, please make sure that you can address those with us. Let's see here. Hassan says, how to encourage employees to hire people with disability candidates. Well, okay, so for many organizations, I think it comes down to bottom line. Bottom line is obviously important. When you run a business, you want to make sure that you're making a profit within your business. I don't want to use tokenism and saying like, oh, well, you're going to always have employees that are more productive if they're part of the disability community because you may be the first opportunity that they've received. But I'll tell you, for many people with disabilities, if you're an employer that is being more inclusive, we have found in many different surveys and studies that people who feel included from the disability community for the first time with an employer, that there actually are getting an increase in their bottom line, that they actually are getting more readiness and productivity. So I think that there are many resources. I'm sure there's many through hirefortalent.ca that talk about the benefits of hiring inclusively. And I think that because they're available in a downloadable PDF, don't be afraid to download that PDF. And if you're in a meeting or an employee resource group or a lunch and learn, and you have a chance to interface with some of the higher management, and they've been really kind of contemplating on whether or not it's a good idea to hire people with disabilities, show them these PDFs printed out. Let them know that there are real organizations that have put time into statistics and numbers behind this, and that they're not likely to be spending more money just by hiring inclusively. In fact, they're likely to attract more people to work with their organization because it's inclusive out the gate. So I think that that would be honestly the best way in which you could go about doing that, and really advocating and championing people with disability conversations within your organization.
I think that was a great answer, Marco. But I think that's all the time we have for today. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to email either info@hirefortalent.ca or Marco himself. We'll be glad to answer those. I want to thank our audience for coming out and joining us today. We appreciate your support for these important topics, and we hope that you took away from helpful information, as I know I definitely did. Thank you again, Marco, for your time. It's always a pleasure having these conversations with you. And please be sure to tune in to our next 20 Minutes with Marco session on May 17th at 3:00 p.m. Atlantic time, where we'll be talking about retention. So you can find the Eventbrite link in the chat or on our Facebook page. And if you are looking for more information on these 20 Minutes with Marco topics, please be sure to visit our website, as Marco mentioned. It's hirefortalent.ca, and we have a lot of resources available there. So thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Caitlin. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next month.
Yes, see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Bye.